On the flip side of it, we're every Democrat's dream come true on the sense that it's fully electronic with no paper trail, so impossible to recount. And everything is centralized in a federal court that oversees the elections. And that was an actual proposal that the Biden administration submitted to Congress in the beginning of his term, to have everything centralized, a federal election. And in Brazil, the guy who oversees that, this court, is a guy that became famous for his beefs now with Elon Musk.
In these last couple of weeks, yeah, we'll get to that, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a problem because you type the number on a machine, it's a number, you type the number of a candidate, and just pray that your vote will be counted right. And if it was not, there's no way to audit. It's just a byte. It's a number that goes to a computer, which is centralized in a court that's managed by a guy that hates Bolsonaro.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. I've been tracking you for a couple of years now, and I remember when you sort of came on the scene into my world, and I think a lot of the issues that you guys are dealing with in Brazil are very similar to the issues we're dealing with here in America. But for some of my audience that just has no idea who you are, could we do a little background check? You just told me a couple things about your business past that I actually wasn't aware of that I think people will find interesting, and then we'll get into the issues of the day.
Yeah, sure. My background was actually in the business world. I worked in the public sector for a few years when I was young, as a staff from congressman, and then on the City Hall of Rio, and I learned a lot. Then I went back to the private sector, to my family business, and I was fairly successful. I did a lot of things in Brazil I'm proud of. One of them was, I was telling you, I was partner of the Trump organization in Brazil. I worked on building the Trump Hotel, Rio de Janeiro, and that didn't work well at all.
No, why not?
It's like people like telling
this is pre-presidential run, Donald Trump.
Wait, actually, we started on 2011 or 2012. So I was just a fan of Trump as a businessman.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I met him in person several times, and I was like very well impressed with him. And but then we built a hotel, and in 2016, when he decided to run for president, that was very bad for business. So it was bad in multiple senses. Part of our luxury crowd just decided they didn't want to have anything to do with the Trump Hotel, because we catered to a lot of artists and the woke people.
Mm-hmm. Was it successful before then financially?
Yes, it was doing all right.
Yeah,
but also the fact that we became a target immediately when they opened an investigation on the day he was elected president. The Brazilian DA, today or 2 days difference, the Brazilian DA opened an investigation against all Trump organizations projects in Brazil.
Wow.
They even issued an arrest warrant against me. It was like a nightmare. I spent 9 months on the Interpol Red Notice list just for being Donald Trump's partner. Ultimately, they closed the case against me. They said, well, you were not supposed to be charged. This was procedurally wrong, but it was quite an experience. And then one day I just decided, when I sold a portion of my company, that I would dedicate myself to journalism. I went to journalism school when I was young, and my thing was that I always thought that the Brazilian coverage of U.S. politics was totally biased. All the correspondents do is just read the New York Times and watch CNN and report that, and we know how inaccurate is that. The Rubin Report was already on back then.
Yeah.
And I just started to tell the Brazilian people the other side of the news. The show started.
So there were really no Brazilian outlets that were doing that sort of thing, leading to a guy like you watching a show like mine, because online at least you can get a counter viewpoint.
Exactly, and I think that's the future, and you have been very successful in showing that for a long time. And one day they invited me to be a guest speaker in a Brazilian TV. It went out well. They offered me a role as a full-time commentator. It went out very well. My videos started going viral, especially because I like debating, and I could debate with the leftists on air live.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I enjoy doing it. And everything started going viral. And by the end of 2022, I was hosting the #1 political show in the country. We used to have, most of the days, we used to have more viewers than Tucker Carlson. And so it's like millions of people watching. And that was until January 9th, 2023. So one day after the January 8th in Brazil, which is our January 6th.
Right.
Then they fired all the conservative commentators.
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell people what happened on that day in case they don't remember?
So Brazil is very similar to the US in many ways. But what astonishes me sometimes is because I cover US politics to Brazil, and I cover sometimes Brazilian politics to the US. But sometimes it looks like I'm talking about the same thing. It's just a different accent. One of the most similar things we have was the January 8th in Brazil, which was, well, we had an election that a lot of people challenged. They tried the courts. The courts didn't do anything. The media started saying that any critics they were just lying, spreading misinformation, and that was the big lie as well. And the election was perfect, and people got revolted. And on January 8th, a bunch of people, that was, of course, it was completely wrong. They started protests in the Brazil capital, and ultimately they really, like, it was a riot that went completely out of control. It
started kind of peaceful though, right? From what I remember at the beginning, and then, yeah.
So a thing that Brazil has very interesting, and we held demonstrations this last week in Rio. Probably 50, 100,000 people were there. Very peaceful. And a month ago, we had 1 million people in the streets of São Paulo. Very peaceful. And we have been having that for a long time. So the Brazilian conservatives have a history of being very peaceful. But that day was different. That day was different, not only because the level of revolt was just higher, people were really upset, but also because we had
Did everyone expect Bolsonaro to win? I mean, was that what was so jarring about it?
It's interesting because we live in a weird world in a sense. The same, again, very similar to the United States. Bolsonaro holds a rally. You get hundreds of thousands of people there going nuts. Lula / Biden holds a rally.
Right.
And there's like circles, no one there. And that created the perception to people, including to President Bolsonaro. He used to tell me, I'm going to have 70% of the votes. They're going to try to steal the election, but I'm going to have 70% of the vote. I'm more popular now than I was on the first time I ran. And he heard
that's kind of what, I mean, that's what Trump's saying now. He keeps saying, well, we just have to overwhelm them. And it's like, all right, well.
Yeah. But in Brazil, the problem with Brazil has a few problems with its electoral system. U.S. has its own problems as well. Some are unbelievable. Like in Brazil, let me brag about the advantages we have in Brazil. Everybody votes on the same day. You need an ID, definitely need an ID to vote.
Wow, look at you guys from the future.
Yeah, exactly. Let me brag about it. But on the flip side of it, we're every Democrat's dream come true on the sense that it's fully electronic with no paper trail, so it's impossible to recount. And everything is centralized in a federal court that oversees the elections. And that was an actual proposal that the Biden administration submitted to Congress in the beginning of his term, to have everything centralized, a federal election. And in Brazil, the guy who oversees that, this court, is a guy that became famous for his beefs now with Elon Musk.
In these last couple of weeks, we'll get to that,
Yeah. So it's a problem because you type the number on a machine, it's a number, you type the number of a candidate, and just pray that your vote will be counted right. And if it was not, there's no way to audit. It's just a byte. It's a number that goes to a computer, which is centralized in a court that's managed by a guy that hates Bolsonaro. So it was like, and you add that with several challenges that people did on courts. And if you think the courts were not very considerate to the challenges that Trump did in 2020 in the US, I'm sorry. And Brazil was way worse, because this guy had the authority to decide everything by himself.
Right. And as you said, this is now the guy fighting with Elon Musk. But before we get to that, so now Lulu is in charge. It seems to me, is it fair to say is he a communist? Is he a Marxist? Like, is he an avowed communist, or do people just call him communist? Yeah.
He's an avowed. People call me a communist. They think they offend me. I'm a proud communist.
Okay, so you got a communist leader. How now in the year plus since then has that changed the country?
Well, very badly in several senses. So, of course, the first thing that happens is the budget went nuts. Like, the government's overspending. Just Lula increased the national deficit in 1 trillion reais, which is roughly $200 billion in 1 year. The public deficit, it's completely out of control. The dollar, the exchange rate with the Brazilian real is the dollar skyrocketed. So the Brazilian real is devaluating. Crime went up a lot. But definitely the area that we can feel the most is on individual freedoms. Because, to be fair, everything that's happening in Brazil didn't start with Lula. Started with Bolsonaro, was done by the Supreme Court, by this guy, Alexandre de Moraes, who is a Supreme Court justice. Mm-hmm. Okay. He was definitely the lead guy on all that. And he's the guy that rules Brazil right now.
If you're looking for more enlightening conversations about international issues, check out our international playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.